Hi, I'm Sonia Sapaban, and I'm calling in from Los Angeles today. First, I want to thank all of you for joining us to talk about how you can simplify diversity, equity, and inclusion and get better results faster with the 3Ps. This is the first in a series of 4 webinars that will go through the month of October. We'll define what the 3Ps are in a moment. But first, I'd like to ask you to please introduce yourself in the chat with your name and when you're calling from today. While you're doing that, just a little bit about myself. I can share that I am actually a NASA engineer at one point. I started my career that way. I was also at Fortune 500 companies later, where one of my other duties as assigned was to lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. I'm now CEO of our office, where we provide an end-to-end solution built specifically for small and medium businesses who want a more equitable and inclusive workplace. So now let's just talk a little bit about the logistics here. I want to make sure that you're aware that you're familiar with this webinar tool. This is a 30-minute interactive webinar. There will be some polls for you to participate in. And also, we really ask you to please use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to ask questions or provide your inputs throughout the webinar. We have one of my colleagues at our office, Anushka Sarif, who will be moderating the questions in real time and chiming in as needed. Thanks in advance, Anushka. Lastly, please note this session is being recorded and will be available after the webinar on our events page at ouroffice.io/events. Okay, so to make sure we're all on the same page, I'd like to start with why DEI is a must-have for your organization and any organization these days. We see 4 key reasons for that: hiring and retention, business outcomes, emerging requirements and expectations around DEI, and your branding and reputation. A little bit about each. First, about hiring and retention. Today, over half of the workforce is actively planning to leave their jobs. Yep, that's right. And 80% of those candidates prioritize inclusion and want to feel that they belong where they work. What's more, once hired, they're 3 times more likely to stay if you have an inclusive workplace. There's a lot of data about the second reason, better business outcomes. One data point I'll mention that you may want to remember is that because of the positive business outcomes overall, inclusive organizations get an 8 times ROI from their DEI efforts. This is proven with our experience ourselves with our customers as well. The third reason is probably least known, but we want to make sure you're aware of it. Whether you're a public company or not, there are increasing DEI requirements and regulations or expectations by key stakeholders like customers, investors, and employees. Examples of these include, for example, the SEC requirement for human capital disclosures that came out in 2020, the NASDAQ diversity rule that was just approved on August 6th of 2021, the rising prominence of corporate social responsibility, or CSR, and the increasing focus on the S, the social factor in ESG, and various requirements or expectations by state and industry. Last but not least, according to PwC, 83% of all CEOs say that they see a benefit from DEI to their branding and reputation, which is significant in today's competitive markets. So with this bit of a background, let's find out which of these is a driver for your organization's interest in DEI. We'll have a poll coming up here in a moment. And so I ask you to please indicate here when in this poll, what is the key driver for your organization's interest in DEI? Is it A, hiring and retention, B, business outcomes, C, emerging requirements and expectations, D, branding and reputation, E, perhaps it's something else. And we offer an option here, the last one. If your organization is just not interested in DEI, but you just personally had some interest and have called in today. So let's see how our polls are coming in. Okay, so we are seeing about Close to 40%, maybe now about a third, are hiring and retention, about a third or so business outcomes, and about 20% or so branding and reputation. That's pretty consistent with what we see. I think the lack of awareness of the emerging requirements and expectations maybe explains how we don't see as many there right now, but it is, again, something that we wanted to make sure and make you aware of. We'll just leave it open for another couple of seconds here, see if anyone else answers. All right, well, we're going to close this poll. It is interesting, right? And again, coming about a third to 40% between those top two, hiring and retention and business outcomes, and then with branding and reputation being important as well. Now let's go on to talk about, well, so if we all agree that DEI is critical for a successful organization, what's the problem? And the problem is twofold. On this side, we'll talk about the problem from the perspective of managers and HR. And the next one, we'll talk about employees. Here you can see hiring managers and HR professionals, they know DEI is a must-have, but they don't know where to start and how to show ROI. And most don't have the time or the expertise internally and can't afford to hire consultants for the long term to make real progress. I witnessed this firsthand as a leader at a major company when I was trying to improve DEI across the organization. We also hear it from our customers every day. So again, please feel free in the chat to share as we go along, any challenges you're seeing with starting or making progress in your DEI efforts. On the employee side, from their perspective, there is a Boston Consulting Group study, BCG, that says it all. They talked to thousands of employees at companies with DEI efforts and found that 75% of the targeted population didn't see any personal benefit despite their company's efforts. This is really significant and quite disappointing. So given these problems, what do you need to address them? Our experience is that you need a holistic approach. But that sounds complex, right? Well, we know that it can be a lot easier if you think of it as any other business initiative that you might focus on. In a holistic approach, you're not just looking at few quick actions. Instead, you look at what we call the 3 Ps, and they're right here: the process, the person, and the platform. In the past 3 years that we've been applying this approach, bringing all of these 3 Ps together, we have seen it deliver results faster than you may think, sometimes in a matter of a few weeks for organizations of different sizes and industries, especially small and medium businesses, but also including iconic brands, public companies, and nonprofits that we are fortunate to work with. So let's talk about each P a bit more in the next few slides. I just want to let you know we have a series of, again, 3 more webinars on this in October, and we'll talk about each of these in more detail. Those sessions will be on October 14th, 21st, and 28th. But again, we'll show you that at the very end as well, so you can put that on your calendars. All right, so now let's talk about the first P. The first P is the process. We know for any business initiative to be successful, you need a well-defined process. And DEI is no different. We call the process that we use the ACT process. The first letter A is for align. That's because for any process to really work in the long term, you first need to get alignment around the why. They say, start with the why, right? You want to start by assessing your voice of employees, what's important to your leadership, and the current state of your workplace culture. Based on this assessment, you can see the gaps and opportunities to help you develop a plan. What's really important in this plan is to link your DEI objectives with the strategic priorities of the organization. And of course, also to address the low-hanging fruit in terms of gaps that you've uncovered during the assessment. I can't stress enough, if there's one thing you remember from this webinar, it's really important to ensure there is a linkage between the DEI objectives and the overall strategic priorities of the organization. This is what makes it sustainable. Again, please feel free to share in the chat if you have a DEI plan or would like to have one, and how those things might be going, in your parts. The second important step is engaging everyone and creating excitement and ownership. That's why we have, connect that comes next, which is the C in the ACT process. Here you want to communicate the DEI plan and educate everyone, engage them in a safe environment to share their voice, concerns, and questions. It's really, again, important at this point to make sure that everyone is on the same page, basically, and that they're excited about contributing. After you have alignment and engagement, it's time to formalize the process with actions towards the objectives in your plan, implement metrics, and track them regularly. This is what we call the transform phase. So that's the T in the ACT process. Because as you start measuring and tracking your progress, you empower the whole organization to really understand what's working and what's not working and adjust as needed to see results. So we've talked about the first P and the 3 Ps, the process. Again, our next webinar on October 14th is going to be dedicated to talking about the process in a lot more detail. What makes it work, examples of specific instruments and tools you can use for assessments, and outline of a successful DEI plan. All right, so now let's go to the second P, the person or the professional. The second P is about the human touch. That's a critical element. Too often we see that someone is tagged to lead the DEI effort based on their passion or their own background as a member of an underrepresented group, but they have no background or experience to make them successful. This was my own case when I was asked to lead DEI as my second job for a major division of a Fortune 500 company. I felt that I didn't have the background or experience, and like other new roles I had previously had in my career, there was no playbook or anyone else to ask either. I was kind of on my own. So this second P ensures that you have a professional identified who typically has an HR or DEI background and can help guide the process for the whole organization. It really is an important element that is well worth the investment. Here's a partial list of the key activities that they can help with. First and foremost, they can make sure that just keep things going on a regular basis when everyone else gets busy. It is really important to have that consistency. They can also be the go-to person in the organization. It gives the organization a face for the efforts. And it also can be a place where people can go to ask questions and situations that they may be encountered. Maybe they don't understand the business case. Maybe they need to understand better how to act in a certain situation. They may also be the lead on leveraging a tool. You might use a tool, but again, there's so many tools these days, and sometimes people just get lost. Here we see on this slide, you can see a part of the Our Office platform that's used, for example, to provide a safe in-house environment to ensure psychological safety for everyone to engage. This is where, the professional that might be there, identified to support your process would be engaged in this tool. And we kind of set an example and some ground rules and help also just, actively engage and motivate everyone else to use such a tool. We will have a panel of DEI professionals at our upcoming webinar on October 21st to talk a lot more about this and how these professionals have helped various organizations in different situations, so you can get a better sense of why this is such an important part of this overall approach. All right, and now last but not least, the third P in the 3 Ps is a technology platform. For any business initiative these days to be accessible and scalable, you really need technology. But I know it's kind of scary, and there's lots of different kinds of technology out there. You want a technology platform that helps address both managers and HR professional needs and those of the employees as well, as we talked about at the very beginning. So you really want to look for a single hub with many touch points to make it easier for everyone. You want to make sure that for management and HR, this platform can make their job easier by providing everything they need to assess, plan, execute, and track their progress in one place, because it's just too hard to look for where everything is. And we find that a lot of people spend a lot of their time just looking for stuff when they want to contribute. And that's time that could go towards them actually taking actions or really moving things ahead instead of looking for things and where to find or where to go to contribute. For employees, it's really important to have this safe environment. It empowers them to engage and have authentic conversations. This is what starts the development of trust and empathy, which is key to inclusion and belonging, which in turn, of course, leads to better retention and all the other good things that we all need in a business environment. As with the other two Ps, we'll have an upcoming webinar on October 28th to talk about technology platforms and how you can select and leverage them effectively for your DEI efforts, including example of features and capabilities that we provide also on our Office platform. So now that we've talked about the three Ps, the process, the professional or the person, and then the platform, let's do a poll to find out which of the three Ps is the most important to your DEI efforts. So let us put up again in the polls. If you would, please respond, which of these three is the most important? A, proven process, B, professional guidance, C, technology platform, D, maybe it's something else, and then E, perhaps it's none of the above. And let's see how these numbers come up. Okay, the process, it seems like it's winning right now with a lot of interest, about 60% of the proven process. Professional guidance, wow, we see that the process is actually keeps being in the 70. It's going back and forth between 60 and 70 as we get more responses here. I'm glad it's coming out that way because frankly, that is also our experience. Here we see about over 70% saying that the process is the most important. And then of course, professional guidance, about 25%. That's again, pretty consistent. Okay, so we see that people are also putting some things in the chat. I appreciate that here. Someone sharing that psychological safety is so important because of the, if the target group speaks up, they shouldn't feel bad about it. Also about the alignment being important. A lot of agreement on that. We appreciate that you're adding some of your comments. This helps us really move this conversation forward. All right, so here is another way to think about the three Ps, kind of in summary. We're going to close out the polls now. And, to get results, you need to link the strategy with tactics. That's another way to look at it. The three Ps, the process, the professional, and the platform, are the key elements needed to do that. Again, here we have another resource for you. You can learn more about the three Ps in an article that was published by Manage HR magazine. We'll have the link here. Maybe Anisha can help us put the link, if you would, in the chat so you can all also benefit from going to that article. And so now that we've talked about the three Ps, what they are and why they're important, let's talk about results and how this type of holistic approach can position HR as a strategic and proactive leader. These are all based on our case studies where a combination of the process, the right professional guidance, and technology that provided data and insights helped our customers succeed. The first one is about linking DEI objectives to strategic priorities. In this case, the CHRO was able to partner with a CMO, with a Chief Marketing Officer, to contribute to the strategic priority of expanding into new markets, which it was about women of color and women of different age groups at this e-commerce company. So that's pretty powerful, right? That's really positioning HR in a very strategic position. And this again came out from that initial align phase where we were able to connect the DEI objectives with the strategic priorities. The second one here is about another client that's in manufacturing. They were able to identify middle management diversity as a strategic focus to improve their retention of top talent, which also helped their hiring. They were primarily focused on entry-level diversity hiring, which is always a good thing, but they were seeing a leaky bucket, whereas they hired, people they hired were also leaving. Well, it was because they couldn't see any diversity in the middle management at the level where they were actually reporting to, or that was very visible to them. So again, identifying this through the data with the professional guidance and with the process that we helped them go through, they were able to identify this fairly quickly. And they got great results because this was in the middle of their performance management process, so they were able to make the right decisions also about promotions and so on. The third one is in the nonprofit sector. The early assessments in the align phase led a customer to identify gaps in their benefits in parental and family care, which helped them increase their retention of top talent. And this has been quite a challenge for them before, but they didn't quite know why. So again, as we did the early assessments in the align phase, and as the professional that was assigned to them helped them, think through that and identify and pinpoint the area, it was very easy to address. Actually, it was something they were just not aware of, and it had almost immediate results. Here, the fourth one I'd like to share here is about providing a safe environment for employees, again, around that psychological safety, which technology platform can really actually help with that. This resulted in a year-over-year increase of 217% in inclusive engagement. This is huge, given that employee engagement has been stagnant, right around 30% for a couple of decades, according to Gartner, that reports on employee engagement consistently. So again, having the psychological safety, having a place where everyone can really bring their whole selves and share and ask questions, be anonymous if they wish. That's really where our technology platforms actually been very powerful in proving that it really works to improve engagement. Last but not least, by having all the 3 Ps and demonstrating a real focus on DEI, another one of our customers saw a 2 times increase in positive comments from new hires during onboarding. Then they noticed an uptick in hiring as these new hires were spreading the word and referring their friends to consider the company as a great employer. So you can see, some of the results that come from the application of all the 3 Ps. In each of these cases, having 1 or 2 of the Ps would not have been enough. It was really a culmination of having all 3 come to play, and with that guidance and a process and data insights that really helped the company move things forward. Now, I hope this has been helpful for you and that you benefited to this point. But the devil is in the details, right? We understand that. So that's why we've made October what we call a month of learning with the next 3 webinars in this series that I've mentioned. They're all on our events page at ouroffice.io/events. The dates and times are here. Meanwhile, please don't hesitate to email us also. You can email us here in the lower left corner. You can see DEI@ouroffice.io. If you have any questions or want to talk about your specific situation and DEI efforts with us, we're more than happy to do that at any time. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I want to thank you again for joining us today. If there are any questions, we're going to give it, we have a few minutes here that we could still answer questions. We have a question here about, can you tell us a bit more about technology platforms out there? Certainly, technology platforms come in a couple of flavors right now. You have sort of point solutions that do specific things for you. For example, you might use a tool to detect unconscious bias in language you're using in your job posts and so on. Or you also have, of course, the big human capital management systems, what we call HCMs, or applicant tracking systems, ATSs. And again, those are all good. What has really been missing in the technology landscape, if you will, in the HR arena and the emerging arena of diversity, equity, and inclusion technology is an integrated platform focused on DEI. Like everything else, if you want to make great progress, you do need that kind of a hub that everybody recognizes. It's just like everything else, where you can go. Obviously, the technology that you select will need to be able to easily upload data or link it with your HCM or ATS. so that you don't have to duplicate data, of course. And so those connections have to be there. But we are at a very exciting time where there is a lot of growth in terms of technology platforms coming out. And again, you have to really look at what your needs are. But at the end of the day, it is important to have an integrated platform and make the access to it as easy as possible. You asked this, how can you, for example, encourage employees to engage when they say they're too busy? I think this is a real, it is a real problem. I appreciate the participant that put this in the chat, and I want to address it. We find that equity and inclusion is a top priority. It's been reported on widely for all employees, and our experience is that when you actually provide an environment, when you show intentionality, you show really you're focused on this, and you provide a safe environment, that people do engage. We see great engagement. It does take, of course, again, the process, overall process. People don't respond when they feel like it might be the flavor of the month, or it's being done just for show, or to just make a statement, and they don't believe in it. But equity and inclusion is actually a top priority, and we have seen results when all the right ingredients are there. So again, we would love to any of these questions if we don't get a chance to answer them. I see a lot of questions coming in. Please, again, feel free to contact us at DEI@ouroffice.io, and we can even schedule a time to even talk about it for a few minutes, or just answer on email. We have another question that says, do you have any tips for someone who wants to start a career in DEI, especially for someone who has 6 years experience in engineering? Wow, that's awesome. I'm an engineer by training, so congratulations that you want to get into DEI. I'm also now, of course, very happily in DEI. Yes, I would say that an engineering background is actually very important. And in fact, we probably want to talk to you at our office. So you can also email us again at DEI@ouroffice.io about that. But I think it's very important because analytics, data, and insights these days are very important in anything you're trying to do. And there is a lot of data out there. So I think the engineering background is a great place to get into DEI. We can talk again a little bit offline about ways to get into it. But there is a lot of also need for DEI professionals out there. And again, I'm delighted to see this, and happy to help with that as we go. If you please contact us a little bit later. I see that we have just a couple of minutes still left, so I'm going to try and answer maybe one more question. Actually, here's a question that talks about the process. How long does it take before we see results in the process? Can we do steps in a different order? So really, how long it takes is very dependent on where you are and where you're heading. But I will say that almost without exception, in all of the work we have done, we see that the process doesn't take as long as people think that it will take to start showing some progress. And so what we always say is it's really important to just get started. And just the fact that you've started, just the fact that you start having an action plan in place, that you start measuring some things, somehow, everything aligns itself and you start seeing some results. A lot of times we see our clients be very surprised, and delighted that they start seeing results in a matter of weeks, not months and years. The key, though, for this is it is important to do the process, in the steps in that order that we described. There's a little bit of leeway in terms of sometimes we parallel some of those, or you can start one step before you've quite finished the other. And at the end of the day, it's an ongoing journey. Those steps of aligning, connecting, and transforming, of course, continue. This ACT process continues, and then you end up doing all three pretty much on an ongoing basis. The key is to have commitment for the long term. This is not, a sprint. It is a marathon, and you can always continuously improve and continue that journey. So I would say that is the key. to remember. Again, thank you, all of you. I see a couple of comments thanking Gus and what you needed to hear. I'm so glad that this is meeting some of your needs. And we're delighted to see you again in October in the 3 separate webinars that I mentioned on the 14th, 21st, and 28th. And meanwhile, please be in touch. Again, DEI@ouroffice.io. We are happy to talk to all of you. Until then, have a wonderful time, a great week and month ahead, and we'll see you again on the 14th. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.